And I want to get right to this very important piece you wrote for Bloomberg, because you say Donald Trump is dead serious about reducing the U.S. current account deficit with China, and it's going to backfire because it's going to cause China's house of debt, cards to tumble. They're going to have a debt crisis. Why?
I think so, because China has depended for quite a long time on cheap U.S. dollars coming into China in order to refinance that debt. And as you have fewer dollars, U.S. rates are rising. There's an intention to reduce the amount of dollars in circulation through trade. As you have less of that, then China has to just print more in order to refinance that debt.
Well, you make another important point in this piece. I'm calling up another Bloomberg chart now from our Bloomberg library that shows, I got the wrong chart up. Let's just put it back down. I'm multitasking because I basically just want to make a point about the Chinese currency. You say a stable currency is one of the pillars of the Chinese government's power. And if that pillar is, wobbling, that's a problem for President Xi.
I think that's true. Xi has made it a central tenet of his leadership that he's going to have a strong renminbi. And what that means, what it largely means is pride for the Chinese people, but what it also means is, well, I have all of this money that I've accumulated during this property boom, maybe I'll just buy property in London.
This will lead to a recession in China, you say?
I think so, yes. I think that's inevitable because China has been driving its growth through excessive injection of debt for many years now, since 2008.
So a Ponzi economy toppled by a recession, hurting the global economy. What does the rest of the world do? What does Donald Trump do in this scenario?
I don't think Donald Trump has an intention to do this. He is backed by a lot of skepticism, I think, and even hostility toward China. What he's actually trying to achieve is not very clear, and in fact, not very well executed, I think. The real problem with Chinese trade is Chinese theft of international IP. And this sort of, adding tariffs is not going to attack that. Nevertheless, this is what we're getting, and I think it's going to be the tipping point for China. In fact, I think we're seeing it now.
And you really don't, you wouldn't be the first China bear to be concerned about the amount of debt and just the systemic risks that are at play in the Chinese economy. But so far, so good, right? Whatever you say about the way that they make policy and the way that they kind of tweak policy to react to market forces, they've managed to keep things afloat. What changes things this time around for you?
That's right. Well, so far so good for the international world that sells commodities and other things to China, not necessarily so far so good for the Chinese people. But what's different this time, I think what's different really is that Chinese banks, the Chinese central government just pushed a ton of money into the economy in 2016 because it was their version of an election year. Everybody had to show growth. Local governments had to show that they were expanding. And it was, it's unpayable. And so refinancing that would require even more injection of money, and there simply isn't that much money to go around without creating massive inflation. And they're trying to pull it back. You're already seeing defaults across the Chinese economy. They can't get bonds out. Rates are rising. It's kind of a mess.